In 1879, Sarah Howe opened a private bank and offered 8% interest per month to thousands of women. However, it turned out to be a mere deception. Sarah Howe managed to collect $500,000 from the women who were deceived by her promises. Several years later, a promoter from Chicago advertised investments with substantial profits through what was called Fund W. This scheme was similar to Sarah Howe's practices, where the promoter fled after paying a portion of the money as interest. In 1899, William Franklin Miller founded the Franklin Syndicate in Brooklyn and claimed to have discovered insider secrets for playing the stock market. He offered investors a 10% profit every week. Miller successfully gathered an average of $80,000 per week and became famous as the 520% guy. However, Miller eventually fled to Canada with $2 million of fraudulent proceeds. He was later arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In the 1990s, Cadena, the owner of the Suda firm, was allowed by the Albanian government to engage in investment business with promises of 5 to 10% monthly profits. However, Suda turned out to be one of the many participants in a widespread Ponzi scheme in Albania. When the profits suddenly stopped, investors were unable to withdraw their money, and Cadena admitted that her company was involved in a Ponzi scheme that ended in failure. This incident triggered riots throughout Albania and almost led to a civil war. The Ponzi scheme initially attracted many Albanian people with promises of high investment returns. Many individuals invested their savings and even borrowed from banks. This scheme initially received support from the democratically elected government of Sali Berisha in 1992. However, between 1993 and 1995, it was revealed that many participants in the scheme were cheating and causing significant losses to investors. Investors couldn't even recover their principal. This scandal sparked a popular uprising in Albania and led to the downfall of the Sali Berisha government. The peak of the rebellion occurred in 1997 when the country was engulfed in chaos, and more than 2,000 people died in clashes between protesters and security forces. Next, a Chicago-based lawyer named Leo Koritz practiced a series of highly spectacular Ponzi schemes. For nearly 2 decades, Koritz sold fake mortgages and claimed involvement in a rice farm massacre in Arkansas. Through the Biano Syndicate, Koritz attracted the interest of a group of shadow millionaires in 1911. He also claimed that they owned valuable forests in a remote corner of Panama. Koritz initiated the sale of shares in this tropical wealth, and by the early 1920s, investors were earning an annual profit of 60%. Koritz managed to amass a total of $400 million from various schemes before leaving the city in 1923. So, why are these investment fraud schemes named Ponzi? The name Charles Ponzi became famous because of his actions in 1920, which had a dramatic and wide-scale impact. His actions garnered significant public attention at the time, and hence became the primary reference for similar schemes conducted in the future. Charles Ponzi, or Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi, was born on March 3, 1882, in Parma, Italy. He was the eldest child of Settimo Ponzi and Amel Bianchi. His family came from a modest background, and Ponzi grew up in relatively poor circumstances. From a young age, Ponzi showed a great interest in exploring the world. On November 15, 1903, Ponzi disembarked from the SS Vancouver at the port of Boston, United States. At that time, he was 21 years old and had the goal of seeking a better economic life. Ponzi settled in Boston, Massachusetts, and survived by working various jobs, ranging from a waiter, store clerk, to an immigration officer. He also briefly moved to New York, where he worked as a table attendant, and later to Florida as a miscellaneous laborer on the East Coast beach. During this time, Ponzi often ended up in jail for involvement in criminal activities, including theft, fraud, and embezzlement. In 1917, Ponzi returned to Boston and found a job as a clerk after seeing an advertisement in a local newspaper. There, he met Rose Necco, and they got married a year later. The couple had 3 children, but their marriage did not last long and ended in divorce. According to Donald H. Dunn in his book, Ponzi, The Boston Swindler, 1975, Ponzi came up with the idea to create an investment scheme that could provide huge profits. The idea emerged when Ponzi received a letter from Spain in August 1919 containing international reply coupons. Dunn revealed that Ponzi's genius lay in psychology, not finance. Ponzi realized that he could generate significant profits by purchasing reply coupons at a discounted price and redeeming them in the United States at full value. Ponzi began collecting funds from investors with the promise of extraordinary profits, such as doubling their investment in a short period of time. Ponzi claimed that he obtained profits through international reply coupon arbitrage, which involved exploiting price differences between different currencies. Ponzi also claimed that his investments would yield a 50% profit in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. These promised profits far exceeded what could be achieved through conventional investments at that time. Initially, he used money from new investors to pay returns to existing investors. Within a few months, Ponzi managed to collect a substantial amount of investment. He attracted thousands of investors who were enticed by the promised profit opportunities. Many people even borrowed money or used their life savings to invest in Ponzi's scheme. The profits gained by early investors made the Ponzi scheme appear successful, which attracted more people to invest. In early January 1920, Ponzi established a company called the Securities Exchange Company. The company was created to run the investment scheme he had devised. The Securities Exchange Company served as a platform for investors interested in participating in Ponzi's scheme, which promised substantial profits. The establishment of this company gave an impression of professionalism and instilled trust in potential investors. Ponzi also executed aggressive marketing strategies and built an image of himself as a successful entrepreneur. He regularly appeared in the news, gave interviews, and delivered persuasive speeches. Ponzi used his ability to influence others to gain trust from investors and attract more funds into his fraudulent scheme. Investors were even lured with promises of 100% profits in 90 days, which were later followed by policies of earning 50% interest in 45 days. The Ponzi scheme provided exceptionally high returns to some early investors, which elevated Ponzi's reputation and his scheme. This, of course, further enticed people tempted by the prospect of quick profits. According to a New York Times report on December 7, 1986, in the first month of operation, Ponzi managed to collect $870 in investments from 15 customers, and within the following 6 months, he convinced 20,000 investors with personal profits of $10 million. Within half a year, he had recruited 40,000 investors and made himself a millionaire. To expand the reach of his offerings to new investors, he recruited several sales agents who were given a 10% commission each time a new investor deposited money. These agents then recruited sub-agents with a 5% commission for each new investor they brought in. With aggressive marketing strategies, enticing profit promises, and an appealing investment return system, Ponzi successfully built a large and rapidly growing investment network. At the end of July 1920, Ponzi reached the peak of his success. He managed to generate profits of $1 million in one day. With that wealth, he lived a luxurious life like a millionaire, frequently driving from his suburban home to the city center in a limousine, accompanied by a chauffeur. However, his success was short-lived as the Ponzi scheme eventually collapsed when he couldn't meet the increasing demands for payments from investors. In the same year, suspicions began to arise, and financial authorities started investigating Ponzi's activities. On July 24, 1920, the Boston Post newspaper featured a front-page article that highlighted Charles Ponzi's story and his investment scheme titled, "Doubles the Money Within 3 Months, 50% Interest Paid in 45 Days by Ponzi, Has Thousands of Investors." The article explained how Ponzi managed to amass wealth through a postal reply coupon scheme that yielded significant profits for investors in a short period of time. In the article, Ponzi's wealth was mentioned to be $8.5 million, indicating the level of success his scheme had achieved. Following the publication of the article, investigations were conducted into Ponzi's activities. In 1920, he was arrested and prosecuted on charges of fraud. In an interview with a Boston Post reporter, Ponzi claimed to be a philanthropist, stating, "I don't like to spend money on myself, so I do a lot of good with it." He was ultimately sentenced to several years in prison before being deported to Italy after his release. Upon returning to Italy, Ponzi attempted to engage in various businesses but often found himself entangled in legal and financial troubles. His post-Ponzi scheme life was not as glorious as his heyday. He spent the remainder of his life in Italy facing various difficulties and challenges, continually striving to restore his reputation and achieve success once again. However, he frequently encountered legal and financial issues that hindered his efforts. Charles Ponci passed away on January 18, 1949, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at the age of 66. His name has become synonymous with the financial fraud scheme known as the Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme is a type of investment fraud in which initial investors are paid with money from new investors entering the scheme. The scheme operates by using the money received from new investors to pay the promised returns to earlier investors, while in reality, there are no actual investments generating real profits. The story of Charles Ponzi has captured public attention and goes down in history as one of the most famous financial fraud schemes. This case demonstrates the impact of investment fraud schemes and provides a lesson on the importance of vigilance and oversight in the financial world.